It has been the fiercest bombardment of this three-week conflict. Scores of Palestinians killed as Israeli forces pounded targets across Gaza from the air, from land and from sea. The main power station was knocked out, cutting electricity to Gaza City and severely affecting water supplies, while the Hamas television station was also attacked. 5 Israeli soldiers were killed in a shootout with militants who tunneled across the border. We'll be live from Israel in a moment. But first, to Paul Mason in Gaza. Paul.
John, just 5 kilometres that way is the forward edge of a modern battlefield with tanks, drones, artillery strikes, snipers, highly motivated troops getting ready to kill each other at the first opportunity. The problem is that world overlaps with the world of bread shops, of petrol stations, of nurseries, of displaced people having their dinner on the grass. And when you mix those two worlds, what you get is this. You get 1,200 Palestinian dead on the Palestinian side. I think we could say the majority of those will be civilians, and on the Israeli side 53 soldiers now and 3 civilians. There is slaughter going on quite simply because the whole thing is compressed into 4 or 5 kilometres of shattered country. Now, there's been ceasefire attempts today. We've had a bit of a farce. We've had the PLO announce a ceasefire. We've had Israeli TV announce a ceasefire. There's no ceasefire. Well, all of this has to be framed by what happened last night. It was shock and awe here for 6 or 7 hours. Intensely terrifying, to be honest, to live through. It was a night of destruction. Last night, Israel turned the sky over Gaza blazing orange and delivered fear. Flares lit the targets. Guided missiles demolished them. This was a TV station allied to Hamas. Due to a warning, nobody was killed there, but others were not so lucky. In Khan Yunis, homes were hit. The official Palestinian death toll was 45 and will probably rise. The mental toll on the children of Gaza can only be imagined.
The whole family was targeted and 17 members were killed.
Here's what's left of the TV station. The homeowners below it now inhabit a ruin. The bigger problem, what's left of the civilian infrastructure already faced by massive stress. Gaza's main power station went offline, its oil tanks hit by an Israeli shell. The fire blazing uncontrolled. Nobody left to keep the sightseers clear. It gets attacked in every war and takes months to rebuild each time. But you need peace first, and there is none. The shells are aimed here, at the battle zone between the road and Israel, its settlements on a hill just 2 kilometres away. We're headed for Zaytun, whose people Israel has told to leave. Though some have, others haven't. The Israelis dropped a leaflet saying you should get out of this area. Why are you still here?
Where can we go? Where is safe in Gaza?
We've just had a shell going off 50 yards down the road. Are you going to stay here?
We're going to stay here. Last night many people evacuated, but they didn't find anywhere. So in the morning they had to come back home.
This man had already fled the suburb of Shajair. Do you think the Palestinian people can win against the level of force we saw last night?
Can win?
Can you win?
Of course we will win. Of course. We'll fight. We'll not forgive. We'll not forget. We'll fight until we get a victory.
But the material strains are clear. These people queue for bread, but there's not enough. There's a water shortage. We found this family eating on a central reservation, living in a ruin.
No, there's no hope. There's no safe life if we move back to the border.
Israeli tanks, for whom the border is currently irrelevant, pounded Gaza. They'd lost 10 men killed in fighting overnight. As Palestinians came to terms with the scale of last night's destruction, anger grew. At funerals, there was fury and defiance. A short-lived attempt by the PLO to broker a ceasefire barely registered. The realization is dawning. Gaza is smashed, and not just physically. This was, until last night, the Palestinian Finance Ministry. This, on the floor, was somebody's job application. But as of now, they're not just missing a 5-story building, they're missing any ability to tax and spend in the Gaza Strip, and indeed govern it. All that's left is the crest of what's supposed to be the government. Hamas still runs this place, but its capacity to do so has been ground down. Well, we'll be getting an Israeli take on all that in a minute, but here at the Shifa Hospital in Gaza, I'm joined by Issam Yunus of the Al Mizan Human Rights Group. Mr. Yunus, what is new about the level of damage that Israel's inflicted over the last 24 hours?
I mean, last night was very horrific. I think it was the model of the state terror. I mean, unprecedented since the outbreak, the launch of this offensive on Gaza. Gaza is a civilian entity, pure civilian entity, with inhabitants of 1.8 million on a geography of 360 square kilometers.
We've seen civilian casualties before. We haven't seen the level of destruction of infrastructure. I mean, do you think there is a case there to be taken to international jurisdiction bodies about human rights there?
Absolutely. What we have seen in the last 22 days, and especially the last day, Israel has committed very flagrant war crimes. Those has already been described by Goldstone in the year 2009.
They will, of course, say that the firing of indiscriminate rockets into Israel is also a war crime. Do you accept that as a human rights practitioner?
Not at all. I mean, how come to destroy? I mean, attacking civilians is absolutely prohibited under international law, regardless of where and when and how. But we are talking about Palestinian civilians who have been intentionally attacked by F-16s, destroy the houses on the residents of those houses. Hospitals have been attacked. Power plant have been attacked. Now Gaza is in complete blackout. Water, sewage system, everything has been dramatically damaged by this. Now Israel has ordered half of the population to evacuate and to be...
These are the leaflets?
The leaflets and the prior notifications of many of the houses.
And what is the status of a leaflet like that? What is the status of a leaflet like that in international law?
It has nothing to do with international law. I mean, imagine if you order a whole nation, a whole population, to evacuate their homes, intentionally to attack residential areas. We're talking about civilian property.
And Hamas themselves, they fire the rockets. They too, have instructed or advised people to stay. It helps them. It helps the fighters in the tunnels for them to be civilians wandering around in the free fire zone.
No, things should be clear. I mean, now blaming the victim. I mean, Gaza, we are talking about a whole civilian entity. I mean, what is the rationale behind attacking a hospital? What is the rationale behind attacking power plant and put Gaza in blackout? I think this is the model where a state feels that it's above the law, immune, as long as the money would provide legal and political cover. This is the problem. I mean, why this is the third offensive to be launched over Gaza in 6 years? Because there is complete silence regarding atrocities that have been committed by a state called Israel.
Mr. Yunus, thank you for that. We'll be putting some of those points now to an Israeli spokesperson, and over to you, John.
Paul Mason in Gaza City.